Wow. Yeah, wow. It's looking real rough. I do like looking at it though. That is something pretty amazing. So it does look like it goes the enamel that we had, some red, another yellow, and this color. But, hopefully that doesn't even look like it goes to the enamel. It looks like everywhere we've got blues where we need to be worried. That is a little deep. Sucks looking over your bike at damage that somebody else did. Dude, they like X'd out part of the VIN. They really coated this so thick so you can't even read it. And in the photos, this was clearly hidden. There was legitimate effort to not show that, in my opinion. But again, unaware that this is actually the VIN on the engine as well. And that was really the piece that, I mean, obviously, look at this thing. How is it not the same bike? Flash in here how it looked last time we had it here. Yeah. So part 2 is not going to be your typical part 2. It's going to be as if it were a part 1, but boy, are we glad to have this thing back. Look at this. This is just, look at this. You know, I guess that was an attempt to reattach the plastic. Oh, man. New grips. I guess that's kind of nice. The old grips were quite a bit worn out. I don't really like these grips, so I'm probably going to change them. Wow. What a just the worst paint job. The worst paint. Look at this. Just awful. Absolute awful. Awful. Look at this. I would have never bought this. Never in a million years. And I feel like a lot of people would have thought the same. Looking at this thing, there was a huge nail in the tire. We're going to have to get new tires at least on the back here. That wheel's not supposed to be gold. Oh, man. What is that? Did they hit something here? Jesus. This thing is rough. Oh, man. A lot of fresh damage. And then they, like, tried to drill in a brake switch or something. Like, I never drill into the frame. Why did they do this? Why? Why would you do that? Oh, man. But I still think the bones are good. Somewhere under there is a beautiful YZ. Tank is barely holding on. The strap that I bought is gone. That strap was expensive too. The famous Seal Saver S that's been worn off in just the particular way. This will be the third video in the series, where in the first video I got this bike around 4 years ago, and it was in not running condition, although not horrible. And after I changed the throttle cable and cleaned out the carburetor, the pilot jet was clogged, and solved a couple of fuel leaks, one from the petcock, one from some fuel lines. I was able to get this bike running pretty good and able to ride it around and really enjoy this thing. I really like riding this bike. It's a lot of fun. I had the second video where this bike was stolen from me around 2 years ago in April of 2024. And in the second video, I go over how I found the bike, where it was, and went and picked it up and was actually able to get this thing back home. I do not think this bike is running, and if it is, I don't think it's running well. The person who had it, I spoke with them and they said that they had done a top-end rebuild. I don't know about that. We'll take a look. Now, when I first had the bike, there was certainly a very worn out intake manifold, which you can see multiple attempts at a repair made on that. And I have since ordered a new intake manifold, so that has come in and I'm ready to install that. Unfortunately, when I got the bike back, it had this incorrect aftermarket carburetor. I doubt that it's jetted correctly. I doubt that it's right for the bike at all. But I'm gonna take a look at that. I'm fairly certain there's probably some clogs as this bike has been sitting for a while. Multiple attempts were done to paint this bike and get it to look like it didn't, so that the proper owner, who is actually me, wouldn't be able to find it. It didn't help. I was able to find it anyway, and sadly, it looks terrible. Looks like they've got a screw in there and did some kind of repair with whatever goo. This bike was crashed a few times while it was not in my possession, and the rear plastic tabs have completely broken off, and it's now mounted here. And I was sitting on the bike the other day just kind of reminiscing and enjoying the fact that I had it back in my possession, and I noticed that the handlebars are bent. So whatever crash happened bent the handlebars, and more than likely I'm gonna have to try and source an original carb. But let's not hold off anymore. Let's go ahead and get started by taking these plastics off, getting the paint stripper on them, and then digging into the carburetor and the intake manifold. Check for spark, check the oil, all those good things, see if we can't get this bike to run. By plastic here. Pretty well. Looks like the air cleaner is still in there, thankfully. Some of the hardware is the same. It looks like the seat hardware is different. Taking the seat off will help us get better access to the plastics. Thankfully, the seat is still in really good condition. Yeah, looks like they bent this up a bit. That's pretty unfortunate. What were they doing? I really hope they didn't bend it like this just to fit this plastic back on. That would be completely ridiculous. Maybe with a little bit of heat and a little bit of patience, we can't get that back to the proper shape. But let's not stop yet. I'm sure more surprises lie in wait. There's a lot of oil on this front fork. Actually, this plastic doesn't look bad at all. I can't see any cracks. The gouges aren't too deep. Now this plastic was one of the identifiers. If you recall, this is off of a 1979 YZ400. The first giveaway was the rear fender. The way that it was twisted in the pictures was just a dead giveaway to me. Then looking closer at this plastic, at the tank, at the seal savers on the front forks, it just became more and more obvious. So far it looks like the rear fender is the only thing beyond rescue. We'll see what I can do here, but I don't know. It's like they have this classic motorcycle. They had to steal it. They had to buy it for cheap and then just wreck it. It's pretty frustrating, to say the least. This plastic's looking pretty poor, as you can see here. The mounting holes are pretty well destroyed. Fortunately, the modification was only made to this rear plastic, so we may just buy a new one. I will still try to strip the paint, but wow, is it looking better already. Next, let's get this tank off here. After taking a quick look on the other side, the mounting hardware is missing. And the rubber tab that goes on the back is also missing. I think I actually have that piece of rubber somewhere around here. I think I bought an extra one to try to make something work with the IT that I have. I think the gas is off, okay. Feels like it's still attached to the mounting hole. Outstanding. Well, it's not leaking gas, so that's a good thing. Looks like it was stuck from paint. Look at that, man. You can see the layers of paint. They had this whole bike red at some point. Oh, that must have looked horrible. I wish I could go back and look at posts over time to see if someone had listed it for sale as red. Huh. It's like some kind of self-tapping screw. Oh, man. Yeah. I replaced this the first time I had this bike. So I may be replacing this again. It's looking better already. I got a lot of good suggestions in a previous video for what I could use to strip this paint off. But I already had this from another project. It is aircraft strength deep penetrating paint remover from KBS. It worked pretty good before. I'm hoping that it will also work on this. So let's see how good it does. The last time I used this, I found it helped to generously add a nice thick layer and let it sit for a bit. And the paint starts to bubble right up. All right, we'll give that a few minutes. All right, it's been about 10-15 minutes. Got a wood scraper, obviously don't want to use metal. In the disposable gloves, let's see if we can't get at least this top layer off. That's pretty satisfying. I should have a piece of cardboard underneath this. It's gonna make a huge mess. All right, got some cardboard down to help catch this. A lot of paint left to strip still, but it looks promising. Nice pile of paint there. So I'm gonna go ahead and add probably coats 2 and 3. No need to keep filming this part, but you get the idea. Looks like the second coat has done a better job than the first. It's been a little bit longer, and maybe I added a bit more. But it's ready to come off. Alright, here's where we're at. A lot of yellow showing now. Filled up this 16-ounce cup completely. Back in the garage now. Let's go ahead and get this carburetor off. Yeah, the boot is just sitting on there. I have a feeling that the opening of the boot doesn't quite fit on this carburetor. This carburetor says it's a key-in. I don't know. I have my doubts. But in any case, it's not the original. And it's a flat slide. See if the jets are clear, see if they're even the right size. Doesn't even look like there's a gasket on here. You can tell how many times people have tried to put silicone on it. Look at that tear. This thing for sure had a massive leak. There's another one. Right there. So 2 very large and a few smaller. See if the reeds come out. We'll get these cleaned up though. Turn the line on. Hard to tell. Looks like that's all scratched up. That's a new piston? I doubt it. Yeah. Well. Oh boy. Even though it doesn't look too good in there, I'm going to go ahead and block up the port here. Got it. Looks like it's got some fuel in there. Of course, the last one in its strips. Bowl looks nice and clean. All right, let's take a look at the main jet. Looks nice and clear. A 170. So according to the book, this bike should have a 370 main jet. 370 main jet. YZ400E. Like, what? Just put any carburetor in any bike you want, you know? Maybe it'll work. Like, let's get this pilot jet out though and take a look. I do not think it will be the right size. I think the pilot jet is clogged though. Yeah, pilot jet's clogged. 50? In the book, it says we should be running a 60 pilot jet. So it probably runs a bit lean, especially with an air leak. Grab my smallest wire here. Felt it break through, so it wasn't too bad of a clog. Tough to tell. There it is. All right, the pilot jet is clear. Let's go ahead and make sure all these little side passageways are clear. Got to make sure everything's cleared up, not just the main opening. Run some carb cleaner through these passageways, through the pilot jet. Get this pilot, make sure the pilot circuit is open. Looks like it is. Main jet, I already know that one's clear. Just make sure to get carb cleaner in all these openings. At all. There we go. Float seems okay. There was fuel in the bowl. The needle still feels rubbery. I'm optimistic. that will work, let's get some carb cleaner through this passageway. 1/2, 1, 1.5, 2, 2.5, 3, about 3.5, which is too far out. However, since the pilot jet is too small, that kind of makes sense. I really don't think that the person who had this bike had the bike running. It just really doesn't seem like that was what was going on here. Back to the setting. And then let's find the air fuel mixture. Here we go. Let's see, where is this at? 1/2, 1, about 1.25. Now that kind of makes sense, because that would mean, well, no, none of this makes sense. This is the wrong carburetor. I'm very suspect as to whether or not this thing will run at all. Had the spring in there, that's good. Let's go ahead and spray this out. Reset it to where it was. All right, that's about where it was, about 1.25. I've sprayed through all the passageways. All the passageways are clear, cleaned out the jets. The jets are clear. We've checked everything other than the choke. So let's check the choke real quick. All right, that seems to be working. Let's go ahead and spray out the passageway. All right, let's get this carburetor back together. So I had the reeds out, was trying to clean them up a little bit because I was going to put them back in, and you can see a bit of a gap there. So especially on this side here. This other side looks to be staying closed. It looks like something's stuck kind of in the reeds. So I'm going to take the reeds apart, clean them up. Want to make sure not to strip these out. I mean, I never really want to strip anything out, but especially these small ones are a little harder to replace. I've got a bunch of bigger bolts laying around, but not a ton of tiny little screws. The worst thing is to get everything back together again and have some minor issue that you didn't address. A little bit of oil, not too much buildup. They look pretty straight. We'll get these cleaned up, reinstalled. I'm gonna go ahead and get the other side while I'm here. No point in just doing one side. Yeah, these are pretty dirty. Get these cleaned up, reinstalled. These look very similar to the other side. I want to make sure you can flip them over. They're symmetrical that way. But this side was laying flat already, so I'm going to remember downside against the side here. Use a card cleaner. Not a lot of carbon and oil or whatever buildup on here, but there's enough that this might make a difference. And since I'm in here, I might as well clean it up, especially since the one side wasn't sitting flat already. Rate cage is cleaned. Very carefully clean these. You don't want to bend them. Yeah, those are cleaned up quite a bit. Nice. Got a little brass brush. It's softer bristles, so it won't score the metal. Just Just give it a little bit of a brush here to get off the stuck material. The reeds go down against the cage, then you have this reed guard, or whatever this piece is called, that goes on the top there, and then your tiny little screws. It's tricky to get this hole to match up just right because the reed is in there, and the screw just pushes itself out. There we go. Once you get one, the other side lines up very easy. And then once you get the ends, the middle one goes straight in. If you tighten one side down too much, you're not going to get it flat enough on the other side, just kind of like everything else. You want to kind of tighten in stages. Well, looks like they're still open. I'm going to try flipping the reeds around. Sometimes when they're stuck open like that, if you flip them around upside down because they're slightly bent, then they bent to stay closed. Get them nice and snug, no need to over tighten. They have lock washers. Nice and snug. There you go. They're closed. No light gaps. So that's what we want. The reeds are all nice and closed in there. So in the previous video, if you remember, if you saw, I accidentally poked through the edge of the gasket maker. And gasket maker obviously makes gasket, so it kind of sealed itself up, and I was able to fix the tube enough to get whatever's remaining out of this thing, so that's kind of fun. We're going to add a little bit of gasket maker to the surface where the reeds will fit. Got the gasket maker on the surface of the cylinder. So it did come with some hardware, but they look a little longer than these. So I'm going to go ahead and use the originals. Kind of pre-seat the bolt to help guide through the gasket. You want this little notch to be on the top side. The carburetor fits into this little notch. There's a tab on the carburetors. So part of the reason the boot fell off so easily was there was a missing hose clamp. This carburetor is a flat slide. The original is a round slide. I've never even had a motorcycle with a flat slide before, so I'm not sure how beneficial that is or what it does exactly. If you could provide a little help with what a flat slide does versus a round slide, I would appreciate it. For now, I'm just hoping that it works at all. Check the action with the throttle. Everything seems to be hooked up correctly. As you go through it, it's like things are missing and switched, and why would you ever take the original carburetor out like that? Because it's clogged? Like, dude. So you put a carburetor on with the wrong size jets. Like, genius, you know? Yeah, and this is exactly what I was wondering before. It seems like this is not the correct size carburetor. So it doesn't actually fit on the boot. I don't want to damage the boot because the boot is still good. Because it was clogged? Like, dude, watch the video I posted. I posted a video of literally the bike. You could have watched it and fixed the carburetor. I'm going to get the heat gun. I think the heat gun should help this process. I get so mad I turn off the camera and I'm just like swearing a bunch. Like, I'm pretty unhappy about the condition that this bike is in. Alright, heat gun. Let's see if we can heat this boot up a bit. It should make it more malleable and hopefully will fit over the carburetor. It doesn't have to be super hot, just get it a little warm. Alright, we got it on there. I'm not super confident that this is going to hold, however, it's on for now. So let's get it clamped down before the thing slips off. should go in and fit the boot, fit the intake boot into the airbox. All right, carb doesn't fit. In that case, we'll take the intake boot off because the intake boot is not quite as important. And I think I have a little bit of some silicone hose or something that I can make a little boot extension. I've had to do that on bikes before, and that actually works. So I took the intake manifold back off. So what I ended up having to do was fill in the cracks as best I could with liquid gasket, and then I wrapped it with insulating tape or electrical tape. I know this isn't a good solution, and I know this won't last very long, if at all, but at least I can get the carburetor onto the bike and see if we can't get this thing to run. So we just got the original manifold back on there for now, and I've got the carburetor stuffed in. Once the boot from the airbox was too hard, it would no longer fit around the carburetor, and so I got a piece of silicone that you can't see at all. So that red piece of silicone is essentially what I'm going to be mimicking here with the inner tube. I bought this silicone and clamp off of Amazon, I think, from what I remember, and basically it bridges the gap between the air boot, which is rock hard at this point, and the carburetor. You can see it doesn't really fit perfectly, but actually it works very well, and I have no air leaks there. So I'm gonna try and do the same thing here. However, I'm going to use this inner tube instead of a piece of silicone. Now, the gap that it has to span is pretty short, but I'm going to cut a little bit bigger than I would expect to need, and I'm going to try folding it. It might be a little too big, and so I'm hoping if I can fold it, it will snug it up a bit. So basically, my idea is that I can fit the air boot and then the carburetor in here, and then hose clamp it shut, and should get enough of an airtight seal. I mean, hopefully it's completely airtight. Okay. I like using the tube for as much as I can. This is a tube that had a puncture in it, or an air leak around the stem. Look at how snug that fits. So like, that's not going to leak air. That's going to work. Now, this isn't a permanent solution. I'm just trying to fire this bike up and see where we're at. I mean, the pilot jet was clogged, so it probably wasn't starting, but it seemed to have air leaks everywhere. The bolt is just long enough. Get this screwed down a little bit. Make sure it stays in place. All right, let's check this plug. This is not the boot that I had. It's loose on here. The plug is different, the boot is different. This is not a good sign. I don't know. The plug looks brown, but it kind of looks like it hasn't been running at all. It just looks like it's been sitting in a shop somewhere. Yeah, there's some wire exposed, but it does not look good. I'm gonna cut just the end of this off to try to clean it up a bit. There we go, we got some fresh wire there. This boot is different, obviously. It leaves this little piece on the end of the spark plug. On my other one, you didn't leave that on there. You know what? I bet you don't leave it on here either. It wasn't even the right kind of spark plug. You couldn't remove the little knob that fits on here, which means that it never connected to the boot. So this project keeps getting worse as it goes, obviously. I'm not super hopeful here, but let's see if we got spark. Yeah, look at that spark. Nice blue spark. Ah, that actually has good spark. All right, it's a brand new plug, so we'll run it a bit and hopefully the plug can tell us if it's lean or rich or what. Let's go ahead and test for compression. I need to put the boot on. Throttle open. Not even 100. Unbelievable. Yeah. I'll try again. Huh. I'm going to put a little bit of two-stroke oil in the cylinder, and if compression is low because the rings are stuck, then this will help get a better seal so compression will go up. It feels smooth, doesn't feel chunky at all. That's a positive. Alright, now if the rings are stuck, there's a chance that they'll loosen up once the bike fires. So what we're hoping for here is that compression goes up a bit. We were at 75 psi, and I don't expect the bike to be able to fire with less than 100. That's pretty low as it is, and might not fire anyway. But with 75, if that's an accurate reading, it will not start. Also, when you're kicking the engine over, always take out the spark plug, because the spark plug creates a spark. You could ignite fuel or something. So you always want to make sure to take that out. I should have caught that before, but I got it this time. We're hoping for straight up and down from this thing. Straight up and down from here would be 150. 100 is probably the minimum. And we were well below that. So now that I've got oil in the cylinder, let's see what we get for compression. Let's see if compression goes up. Throttle open. It's all the way up to 150. So the rings are definitely stuck, which is good. Almost 150 now. All right, hopefully after we get it fired, the rings loosen up. I know there's some oil in here because it's leaking all over the garage floor. Let's see what we're working with. There is a little bit of oil on the dipstick, and it looks brand new. So more than likely what happened is all the oil leaked out of this bike, and then just before it was shown to sell, the person who had the bike added oil so it would show oil on the dipstick. There is enough in here to run, but let's go ahead and add just a touch more. I'm going to do an oil change eventually, so for now I'm just going to throw in this 10W30. It's a bit cheaper than the 10W40 wet clutch oil, and I'm not going to be riding it. I'm just going to be firing it up and running it here a bit. Alright, so oil's good. We've got spark. There is compression. It looks like the rings are stuck. However, with two-stroke oil in there, we're getting enough for it to fire. We're getting around 150. The air boot has a coupler which I made out of a old inner tube. I believe that should restrict the airflow as only from the box. And the intake manifold, which had cracks and air leaks all over it, I filled in every crack and air leak I could find with liquid gasket maker and then wrapped it up with insulation electrical tape. And that's all clamped down. The pilot jet was clogged and now it's unclogged. The spark plug was the wrong spark plug. There's no way that it ran in this boot. It didn't even fit in the boot. So the seller, I called them the seller, the person who had the bike just put a plug in there, I guess, to show that something was in there. So quite a few issues. I'm sure this bike hasn't been run for a while, regardless of what the person said. And since we've gone through everything, I suppose we might as well take a look at the air filter. It's looking a little rough and the plastics are off, so it's easy to access. 2 screws and a bolt. Love it. Looks a little dirty. This is the same air cleaner element that was in here before. I can tell by the way it's crunched up and the stains that are in here, and didn't look this rough. I have some air filter element cleaner that I will run this through. However, since we're just trying to see if this bike fires up, it's not horrible as it is. It's dirty, but it's not terrible. So I'm going to try and fire it up like this. Yep, it definitely seems like the kill switch is working. All right, just about ready to go. It's not exactly a looker, but we're back to yellow mostly. And yeah, the tank looks pretty bad. Like I was saying before, the color of the tank is actually this blue. So as I strip the paint, more and more blue comes through. I would prefer to have the tank all the way blue, but the yellow paint is like some kind of enamel. It's not really coming off super easy. So I was just trying to get off as much of the red and gray and whatever. The side plastics, they came out a little cleaner, but like you could tell, I don't know if that's burnt on there or what, but these plastics were painted yellow when I had it to get them all to match. And I think this is just like age showing through. But it is looking a little more like my bike. Although I did hook up like an emergency pull cord here out of rubber. So by pulling on it, it will cut spark in case the button doesn't work. I have grabbed and pulled the boot off before barehanded, and it shocks you pretty good. So hopefully this doesn't shock me. Rubber is not a good conductor of electricity. However, we'll find out how it works. Should we need to? Hopefully we don't. I've got some fresh 40-1 mixed up. Let's go ahead and add it. I'll put some earplugs in because this thing screams. Will it fire? Alright, starting with what's easy. Spark plug gap. YZ400E is not here. However, all the YZ400 models share the same gap, so 0.024 to 0.028. So the gap is a little big, not horribly big, but let's see if we can't get that to work. Close the gap, press on it a little bit. Got that perfectly in range. So let's reinstall it and make sure it wasn't the gap. All right, let's see what's going on inside this carburetor. All these hardware are very loose. It's a little gummed up in there. Looks like everything's present though. Oh, it's got the needle clip. I think that says 370. Yep, 370. Good, so that's the stock main jet. Now let's see about the pilot. 60. Good. Okay, so we've got the stock jetting, thankfully. And this thing obviously has seen better days. The gasket's completely gone. So we'll have to get a new gasket. However, everything is here. Seems like that was just screwed all the way in. So maybe this bike had a little bit of a running issue. Yeah, pilot's definitely clogged. So perhaps when this carburetor was installed, the pilot was already clogged. All right, let's see where the air screw is at. About 1 1/4, which would lean it up, which is also consistent with the clogged jet. Pretty dirty here. Next, let's get the choke out. So the choke is sticking. Maybe something's clogged in there as well. It's always tricky trying to get these carburetors apart because the pieces are brass and the metal is soft and they're very old. So I don't want to turn on it too hard. All right, there it is. Yeah, it could just be gummed up. There's a lot of dirt and grime on here. Still has the little washer. Has the washer on the bottom as well, although it's stuck on there. A little grimy. Now, how to get the emulsion tube out. I would really like to get this out of here. I don't have a tool to fit over this, and I don't want to press. I don't want to push on this because it's thin. So we might just leave that in there. It's not worth the risk, I don't think. So you want to take it off because, like, look at all this stuff that's built up there. And more than likely it's fine, but you never know. Like a little piece of that could get sucked in through here and then get pulled into a jet. So let's put this in the ultrasonic cleaner, and I'm sure it'll clean it up nice. We might have to run it through a couple of times. Got my little jet cage for all the little bits. The jet's going in there. Got the screws, the needle. Got the carb out of the ultrasonic cleaner. It's not perfect, but it's obviously much better than it was. Still some gunk and buildup. I'm going to clean it up now. This is a much more thorough cleaning than the first time that I cleaned out the YZ carburetor, but this carb was in much worse condition. Not really worse condition, but this carburetor was a lot dirtier. I remembered that I have extra carburetor parts. I dug through the box, and sure enough, a Mikuni cap. So now I've got everything. I don't have to order any pieces for it. There's like something in there. Alright, and then we'll definitely blow through all these with the air compressor. And the main jet. So I still have the sizes memorized from the other day. And the carb in there now has a 170 main. And this is a 370 main. Quite a bit of size of difference. And then the pilot jet that's on the bike now is a 50, which, I don't know, should work. But we got a 60 now. That's kind of why I'm a little apprehensive about this carburetor business, because you would think a 50 jet would still run, but I mean, the carb is just wrong for all kinds of reasons. Maybe it wasn't even the jetting that was the problem. You always make sure your brushes are clean, because stuff can hide out in the brush and then you run the brush through and you leave it behind. And I dug through the O-ring box and found an O-ring that looks like it works, so let's see how that fits. Perfect. Yes, I am so happy about this. I was like checking everything in the garage, like nothing has a carb with this kind of cap that fits. And then I remembered I had that box and it was just sitting there. It wasn't even in anything. Just this cap was just sitting in the box waiting for me. All right, I'm gonna blow through everything with the air compressor, put the carb back together. All right, the carb is almost completely back together. I didn't finish assembling the choke because I noticed this plastic piece was splitting. So I put a little bit of epoxy on there to fill in the crack, and I wrapped it with a little bit of electrical tape. Probably not the best long-term solution, but for now it should work. So I'm going to put this on now because I can still take the choke off with the carb on the bike. And it takes a bit to put this on. So I'm going to throw this on and fix the air boot, fix the intake manifold, just get everything together. And then we'll see where we're at from there. it seem too easy. So this can be pretty tricky now with the spring, the slide down. You don't want to drop anything. I didn't just put it on the ground. I got a nice clean spot for it. The first screw especially can be a little bit of a fight. Not too bad. Just be doubly careful not to cross thread here. You'll be in big trouble. These tiny screws should go on very easy, so if it's at all difficult, do not force it. You got the short groove and the long groove. The short groove is what fits on the throttle adjust screw. The needle's got to fit into that little hole, and you have to line everything up. I find, little shakes helps seat the needle. And get the new manifold put on. Already got the gasket on there. Yeah, so too big. This one will fit nice. Up all the way. Perfect fit. A lot of things to match up here, but there we go. Bike's back in the garage, and it's about a week later. I went ahead and ordered a new throttle cable. So I am going to put this new throttle cable on, and then we'll go back out, try to fire it up again. Haven't tried yet with the new carb. Again, the throttle cable just wasn't fitting. It doesn't work at all, actually. So when I got the carb, it was missing this top cap, but I'm gonna try and rob this piece and see if it doesn't fit on the cap there. And then it looks like it's the same cable otherwise. All right, to free this piece, first you gotta pop this little clip off. Not too bad, trying to shoot it across the garage. All right, little clip, comes off. And then this should unscrew, there we go. Losing pieces. Instead of fighting with this piece twice, this cable's shot already. I'm just gonna cut it out. All right, I'm gonna clean this up and see if I can't fish the other cable through here. So this definitely fits in the YZ cap. Perfect. And then there's the cap, and finally the washer. It's a little tricky because of the way you have to push the bottom on, because it's curved. It's hard to get a good press, but there we go. C-clip is on. Everything looks right there. While I had the carb off, I went ahead and refit the choke on. It's much easier to operate now. Opens and closes as I would expect. Got the new cable on. It's looking fresh. Everything's matching up down here real nice. And if you listen, a little bit of play, things pops right back. So we're finally ready to give the new carb, the new cable, the new manifold, spark plug gap set properly. So let's go try and start it. time. Let's see what's going on in here. I don't think anybody's had this cover off. Yep, tore the gasket out. She's looking a bit corroded. Just a bit rusted also. Let's get this bolt off here. Now the question is, do we have the puller? Alright, let's look for it. Alright. Left-handed threads, that's the one. There aren't a whole lot of jobs on a motorcycle that require all the special tools, but pulling the flywheel is definitely one of them. You gotta have a few different tools. It helps to have an impact wrench for sure, but you definitely need a flywheel puller, and it really helps to have this flywheel vice grips. I don't know what I did before. Some rust in there. Definitely gonna clean this up. Some corrosion. That's not good. But let's check the timing. That's what we're in here for. It's slightly off, but that's not far enough that it wouldn't fire. That corrosion's pretty bad. So there's pretty heavy rust in here. I've already cleaned off 3 of them. So I'm gonna go ahead and clean this one up. So I'm not sure that it has anything to do with the timing now. The woodruff key is still there. It still looks good. So I don't really think it's this either. But it can't help. Now this isn't perfect, but it's certainly better than it was. And I've never had the flywheel off of this bike before, so I'm not sure the condition it was in. But something tells me it's not the flywheel. Alright, flywheel's a little better. But I don't think this is the problem. So I'm going to get the flywheel back on and we'll continue the hunt. I got off most of the corrosion. This bolt and this bolt are starting to strip. So I'm not going to push it. It seems like the timing mark is still lined up with the tick in the frame. I don't know. I don't know what I expected to see in here. I doubt that the timing would slip. Maybe that the woodruff key had sheared, but the woodruff key is in there and it looks good. I did get the flywheel cleaned up quite a bit. There was a lot of rust on here, and well, now there's not. So let's put this back on and we'll give it a few kicks just to make sure that it wasn't the flywheel. I really don't think it was, but one thing at a time helps diagnose better. If you start fixing 10 things at once, it's hard to tell what fixed it. Alright, we've got a big washer, a lock washer, and the nut. So I was thinking it was the ignition coil, but then I remembered that the compression was super low, and even though I put oil in the cylinder and the compression came up, I don't know how long that oil stuck around. So before I just dumped more oil in there to get the compression back up, I actually put a bunch of PB Blaster down the spark plug opening, and it's been soaking for a day. So I'm going to test compression again and see if those rings haven't freed up at all. And then if it hasn't, I'm going to put a little more 2-stroke oil in there and see if the extra compression will help the thing kick over. Once it's running, the ring should loosen up, but we'll see. not even 75. That's definitely going to be the problem here. There's just no compression. Not looking good. Alright, let's put some two-stroke oil in there. We get higher than 75. Certainly feels it already. $125. Yeah. Alright, stuck rings, hopefully. So these screwdrivers are awesome. They've got a nice extra leverage thing here, and I was able to free up this bottom one pretty easy. So this one will come out. See if we can get the top one the same. Oh, yes. I mean, it looks fine. This boot is weird though. And it looks like the same. Mounting holes are the same. The new one's broken? Okay. What the hell? I just pulled this out of the bag. Alright, back with the original coil. I thought I remembered trimming off the wire here, but I don't see any exposed wire. Let's see if we can't get some exposed wire. That could be a problem. Alright, there's some fresh wire. Found a nice NGK boot. I'm going to use this one instead. If nothing else, it just doesn't remind me of past experiences with this thing and parts that I did not install. And it also looks like when they repainted, they had the coil off. And so the ground's probably not good. Maybe there's no ground and the extra electrical current's making the coil hot, I don't know, and it's burning the wire out. So I'm going to clean off these posts here so we can get a good ground. I've cleaned up quite a bit. I'm also cleaning up the threads because they have paint on them, so they definitely sprayed this bike down, at least the frame, without the ignition coil on. But that should give us a much better ground than we had before. Nice and blue. Hopefully that showed up on the camera. Alright, let's get this plugged back in. Yeah, it's kicking over way too easy. I'm really thinking it's compression now. Alright, so even with the oil now, we're not even getting to 75 psi. My guess is it sucked in a bunch of sand because the boot didn't fit right and the manifold was all cracked. Sucked in a bunch of sand, probably scored up the piston in the cylinder. Maybe even a ring's broke. Although I feel like I'd have 0 PSI with a broke ring. I think the next thing to do is to start to tear in the top end. I was told that the top end was rebuilt. So they either did a bad job, which I wouldn't doubt. In fact, I'd be very surprised if they did a good job. And then there was the issue with the intake. My money's on cylinder rebuild. So I'm going to dig into that next, but let me know what you think. We will get this running eventually. Hopefully sooner than later. But other bikes to ride for now, so it's not super critical, other than the fact that, I mean, maybe it's an ego thing. My bike was stolen and came back a piece of junk. Let's get it running again. Got the tank back off, got the seat back off, and now we're gonna take off the pipe. Well, we'll take a look at the head, but after that I'll take the carb off, and then I will pull the cylinder, and then we can check out the piston and see what kind of condition the piston is in. So this spring right here is not installed correctly. It'll be a bit of a bear to get out. Maybe. Yeah, so it's like extra tight, and then you should be able to pull it off from here. However, the way they have it installed, you have to pull it off from the top end. Springs are pretty scary, so we're going extra gloves and eye protection here. It's always a good idea to wear eye protection. But in the case of springs, I feel like it's necessary. I want to be able to keep my eyes open so I can see what I'm doing. I used to work at a circus school, and I was a trampoline coach. And I wasn't the only trampoline coach there, but I remember one time I went into work, and one of the other trampoline coaches had been coaching a class, and one of the trampoline springs broke while he was in there jumping around, and the spring came back and hit him in the arm and gave him a huge gash, and he had to go to the hospital and get all these stitches. Now, as a trampoline coach and someone in the circus, a scar like that's super awesome, because it's like this badge of, you know, I'm a trampoline coach in the circus. But you don't want to be getting scars. And he was really lucky, you know, it was on his arm. It looked really cool, and you know, no major long-term consequences. However, a spring will get you. A spring will get you real good. Okay, that worked. So the spring's really hard to push on, but by gripping it with the vice grip, I was able to push on the vice grip, and that gave me enough leverage to push this spring out. When I took the plastic off, I loosened this, so it's just held on here. Very easy. Okay. Let the silencer off. Yeah, that dent wasn't there. This bike must have been wrecked so many times. It's just dents and broken pieces everywhere. So I didn't tighten this down. When I put this back on, I'll be sure to put some Loctite on here. It's tough because this spring is jammed. There we go. Okay. So now you see why the silencer had to come off, because the pipe has to come out this direction. This fender plastic out of the way. There we go. It's not too bad. There's a little bit of a dent here that was there, and then there's this massive dent on the bottom that was not there. So that's fun. Got the 12mm deep socket here on the 1/2-inch drive. So the book says to remove these in a star pattern. See, I left the spark plug in because you always drop stuff, and of course that would have gone straight into the spark plug hole. Alright, there's all the head bolts. The head is super loose, not a good sign. It's only a 2-stroke, so there's not much to it. But the head's a little dirty, but it does look like it's in decent shape. The head gasket has seen better days. We will be getting a new head gasket. 4 special nuts that fit down inside of this cylinder. But before I do that, I'm going to remove the carburetor because otherwise we're going to have an issue. You've seen me take off the carb 100 times, so I'm just going to take the carb off camera. Maybe the rings are stuck, I don't know. But the cylinder is super easy to get off of here, so let's go ahead and get the cylinder removed. Okay. So I did on an IT-175 once, snap off every single one of these bolts. I have a little bit of hesitation here, just because that IT was in really bad shape. This one is in bad shape, but not nearly the kind of bad shape that the other IT was in. All right, good. Got all 4 broke free. So everything lines up with the opening. What was that? Oh, wonderful. So that's broken. Let me open this up. All right, so that's out of there. And there's the cylinder. All right, first order of business is to protect anything from falling into the bottom end, because the bottom end, so far so good. I'll kind of get this wrapped around here. That should stop anything. Let's pull the piston up a little bit. All right, good. So this should help us from any falling debris. Oh man, this piston is scored. These rings are really stuck. Oh, look at that. Oh, that's not good. I think this is going to need a new piston. My guess is what I was thinking before, because the air boot wasn't on and this bike wasn't taken very good care of. It looks like dirt, debris, sand, everything got in there and just chunked this piston up. That's why the ring is stuck. That ring will not unstick. It is like welded in there. Yeah, it's definitely going to need a new piston. We'll take a closer look at the cylinder. Wow, look at that. I wonder if this thing was run with just pure gas and no oil. Doesn't it kind of look like everything melted, like that's melted ring? So no wonder these rings didn't unstick. Feels like there's a little bit of something here. Let's take a look at it. So this is the exhaust side. This is where the rings were melted. Special feature of the glove being ripped off is I can expose a nail. It feels like buildup more than scratches. The cross hatching's gone. A little bit of something there. Let's see, what's that? Again, it feels like build up as opposed to like a deep scratch. And here's the back side. Like, well, I'm definitely happy that I put so much oil down this thing before I really started kicking it over. I kicked it over quite a few times. Yeah, the surface here looks pretty good. Everything looks pretty good in the cylinder. So the jug, I don't see any damage on the outside either. Yeah, so I'm going to hone this up. I'm going to measure the bore, and I'm going to order up the proper top end kit. Get the manifold off. So I'm going to get these into a bag. There we go. Going into the bag. And I'm going to put these in the box with the other parts. Let's go ahead and oil this up. It's definitely looking better. Still quite a bit of scoring in there. All right, got my bore dial gauge out. I'm going to measure the bore here. The locations that it wants us to test are right at the top, about an inch below the top, right below the ports, and then about an inch up from the bottom here. So we're 1500ths out, and we're only supposed to be 1000ths, 1/10. So that's quite a bit bigger. And we'll come up here to the top. See, that would be all right. Okay, well, now that we have this zeroed at the widest spot, let's see what size that is anyway. It's a lot easier to do when I'm not trying to film. Okay, get it right in between there. So I'm rocking it. So with 85.43 anyway, we're already going to have to size up the piston to get this thing to fit. Because 85 is the standard bore, and we're at 85.42. I'm gonna have this guy size up the piston a little bit more. And the main reason for that is there's still a little bit of a spot right here. And there's one area where my fingernail catches as well. And I feel like size over piston and a rebore, that should clear this up the rest of the way. And since I have to get a new piston anyway, the standard bore piston's already not going to fit in here right. We're going to take it to the machine shop. We're going to have the guy machine this out, and then we'll reinstall everything. So that'll take a bit. It'll be a couple weeks on this bike, but like I said before, we've got another project or 5 that are ready to be edited and come out. And we're making progress here. This is obviously the biggest issue, and once we sort this out, we'll be ready to go. But it's pretty clear to see now that the piston's out where the problem is. And that is obviously a huge problem. So that's the reason we lost compression. There's all kinds of scoring happening on this piston. New piston, new seals, new gaskets. I might just pull the bottom end off and clean up the paint while I wait. That way, at least it could be a black engine back again. And yeah. All right. So we'll catch you next time.